I'm joined on the set by Oliver Farry from our international desk. Hello to you, Oliver. We heard some of the reaction to Berlusconi's death there from the Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. She called him one of the most influential men in Italian history. How do you view that statement?
Well, I would agree, actually. I love him or loathe him, and there were plenty of people on both sides of that equation. Silvio Berlusconi was a towering figure in recent Italian history and probably the country's most famous politician since the Second World War. For his admirers, he was a self-made man, a canny, down-to-earth billionaire who helped drive Italy's economic growth after the country's political duopoly from the post-war period fell apart in the 1990s. For his detractors, he was corrupt, misogynistic, a coarse figure with a willful disregard for the common good of society. But an influence he certainly had, and it's fair to say that that influence has stretched well beyond Italy. The man started off as a singer in nightclubs and cruise ships, and he remained a showman all his life, even as he amassed billions and entered politics, becoming Italy's most powerful man in the 1990s. From the late 1970s, he built Italy's largest media empire. His television stations changed the media landscape. He even came up with the idea of the UEFA Champions League because the AC Milan team that he owned, he was actually quite annoyed that they had to play against Real Madrid too early in the competition, under the competition's old format, so he brought in more of Europe's big clubs. Many said that his TV stations contributed to a coarsening of television, but the brash, often vulgar programmes resonated with many Italians. And Berlusconi himself liked to flaunt his fun side, sometimes to contrast himself favourably against more staid technocratic opponents such as Romano Prodi and Mario Monti. In that sense, he was the father of modern populism. He knew what buttons to press, what grievances to draw on, and also what persona to adopt to win over voters, and it often worked. He served 3 times as Prime Minister, and he was a forerunner, you could say, of Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, even if he was far more successful than either of those, both in business and in politics. Berlusconi was an instantly recognisable figure around the world, something that does not happen too often in the realm of politics, particularly Italian politics.
Yeah, and like those men you mentioned, he made headlines because of his politics, because of his wealth, because of his power, but also because of the scandal that followed him.
Yeah, the allegations of corruption were legion. He was indicted several times on a range of charges, including abuse of power, bribery, collusion, witness tampering and fraud. Only once was he convicted, or at least did it stick. That was in 2012 of a tax fraud. His 4 years prison sentence was commuted to 1 year's community service. In later years, he became notorious for a series of sex scandals he was involved in, particularly with regard to his conviction for involvement in 2013 in child prostitution. In the Ruby case, that conviction was overturned on appeal, and Berlusconi proudly trumpeted his exploits, often in a very macho and sometimes homophobic way. In the past, this might have cost him in a country of conservative Catholics such as Italy is, but his vaunted virility was admired by many people, including women, and in a way very similar to what happened with Donald Trump later in the United States. Now, the legal tribulations never really stopped. His most recent acquittal came in February this year when he was cleared of bribing witnesses. If he had lived long enough, no doubt he would have had to face many more.
All right, Oliver, thank you very much, Oliver Farry from our international desk.